Sunday. We're gonna start on our backs today. So finding our way onto our spine and just letting your body settle here. Maybe the palms face up, maybe the eyes close. Certainly, we just think about finding our little place on the mat, protecting that space, knowing that things exist beyond the edge of the mat and that they'll exist beyond the edge of the mat an hour from now as well. And if we want to entangle ourselves with those things, at that time we can. But for now, we're here on this little protected bubble that is our mat. There's this very talented, very well respected sculptor who has really just started to be able to charge significant amounts of money for his creations, for his artistic work. Next time that you inhale, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already, so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling or sky. And then we'll just take our left ankle across our right thigh. So we create a little figure four. This feels like it's putting enough work into this rotation, this external rotation of the hip here. It's perfect. If you find a little bit more space, you can see if the torso geometry, the arm geometry works to press the left hand into that medial edge of the left thigh and potentially accentuate that external rotation. Noting wherever we are, at what location any restrictions are manifesting. If they're manifesting, a lot of times if they are, it's going to be hip flexor related. But it's theoretically possible the medial line has some restrictiveness, and that becomes the limiting factor. It's possible that the knee bend and the low quad insertion, high calf insertion, excuse me, are limiting factors here. We're just noting if there are any limitations. And then we'll release the arm if we're using it and extend the left leg towards the ceiling or sky. Towards doesn't need to be directly at. I'm just going to slowly, gently, delicately lower that left leg down to the mat until it rests and deactivates the musculature. Once you get that deactivation, let's bend the left knee and we'll land that left foot, splay the toes out nice and wide. And we'll do the same thing to the second side. So the right ankle is going to cross the left thigh. And we just determine if there's space, if the geometry works, to put the right hand into that medial edge of the right thigh for a little additional expansiveness. It's also theoretically possible that the lateral chain, the oblique musculature, could be a limiting factor here. Just think about as you get into your fullest external rotation, what, if any, limitations are presenting. Just find our ease here. The ease in the physicality of the body, but also the ease in the way we're respirating. Maybe ease in the way we're thinking. When it feels appropriate, we're going to release that right hand if we're using it. And then we'll extend the right leg towards the ceiling or sky and let the right leg, slowly release down to the mat until the musculature can deactivate. And then we'll bend the right knee so that it mirrors the left. When it feels appropriate for you, let's just let the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels best. And we'll press ourselves up into a seat. And in this seat, let's just cross the legs if it feels comfortable. If something else feels more comfortable, let's use that. And think about getting the spine vertical. And then if it feels comfortable for you, let the eyes close. If it feels comfortable for you, let the palms face towards the ceiling or sky. Let's start to slow down the rate of respiration so that the inhale becomes a drawn in expansion of the lungs. And the exhale becomes an elongated emptying of the lungs. Just feeling the slowness of your breath as you inhale and as you exhale. Slowness in to the inhale and the slowness out to the exhale. And then we are going to bring an equilibrium to our respiration. So as you inhale, just count the duration. And as you exhale, mirror that same count. So if the inhale is a 5 count, the exhale is a 5 count. The inhale is a 4 count, the exhale is a 4 count. The inhale is a 12 count, the exhale is a 12 count. We're just noting the duration of the inhale, mirroring that duration on the exhale, so that there is a perfectly balanced line of delineation between your inhale and your exhale breath. Give ourselves just 30 more seconds, just breathing with an equivalent inhale and exhale, establishing this pattern of breath, noticing the delineating line, feeling the switch between the inhale and the exhale. But on either side of that switch, we have this equivalent energy expenditure. And when it feels appropriate for you, let the eyes open if they're closed. As we start to mobilize and progress through practice, let's continue to work on this balanced line of delineation between an equivalent inhale and exhale. So we'll move to a staff position. Breath stays an equal inhale and an equal exhale. And then let's add some dynamic movement. So the next time that you exhale, we'll slowly release ourselves through the full count of exhale into a fold. And then as we inhale, we will retract and find ourselves back in a traditional staff. So your exhales are carrying you forward for whatever count that is. And your inhales are bringing the spine back to vertical in an equivalent count. Kind of like a slow motion rowing here. And we'll just work through movement and breath. The next time that you forward fold, stay in your folded position as you inhale, but maintain the duration equivalency. And as you settle into this fold and the breath now cycles through you at your end range, notice where any limitations are speaking from. Where are we getting feedback? Not as the physical position changes because it is relatively static, but as the cycle of breath rotates and as the position of that cycle mobilizes, what's going on in the body as that's happening? So it's just another 60 seconds here in this fold. So as this sculptor got more and more popular, the rates for his work got increased more and more. He turned down more and more jobs. Turned down might be the wrong phrasing. He requested more compensation than people were willing to offer. When it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our spine back to vertical. And we are going to head to a wall here. So from staff, we're going to reorient our staff into a inverted position. Spine is on the ground, legs are up the wall. With the goal of relaxing so that the sacrum tucks, arms just fall into a place that is easy. Respiration is an equivalent inhale to exhale. Remember that the knees can bend here. In theory, coming out of a forward fold, this is a softening of the position, right? So we're taking some of the tension off the posterior chain in comparison to our forward fold. That doesn't mean that the position feels soft or the position feels easy. And so if it's not feeling soft, if it's not feeling easy, bend the knees, maybe put the feet against the wall. The lower you bring the feet down, the more work we put on the hips, but the more slack we offer to the posterior chain. So keep that in mind. Even when old friends would ask the sculptor for a favor to create something special as a gift or a monument, the pricing was never adjusted. It was always the very top dollar of what the sculptor thought he could get and what he was worth. Eventually, some local younger artists came along and asked if they could do an apprenticeship. And he told them they both could, but he also informed both of them that there would be no pay. And they agreed because they wanted to learn. And he was the best sculptor anyone had ever seen, at least in this area of the world. And so they weren't there for financial compensation, they were there for knowledge. Check back in with your respiration. Equal parts inhale, equal parts exhale, and note what your count is. So we want to know what the inhale count is. We want to mirror that with the exhale count. Feel how your body is settling into this position. Where are the areas where the body is most relaxing, most expanding? Where are the areas where there's the most restriction, the most fight? And we are going to add two more equal parts to our breath. So we're just turning this into a box breath. So now we're going to have an inhale of a set duration, whatever your duration is. At the end of your inhale, you're going to pause for an equivalent duration, and then exhale for an equivalent duration, pause for an equivalent duration, and inhale. So there's four sides of your breath now: an inhale, a pause, an exhale, and a pause. And they're all going to have an equivalent duration of time. Each side is an equal amount of time. So whatever your inhale is, add that for a pause. Whatever that inhale was, it's the exhale. And then that same pause before your next inhale. Just feeling the four sides of our breath. And as the respiration cycle becomes a little bit more autonomous, think about the physicality of the body. Where can we tweak to adjust? Can we adjust to tweak so that we find more space? Feeling all the way in to the corner where our tailbone is tucking into the wall, and to the corners of all four sides of our breath cycle. As the box breath gets more ingrained, more and more autonomous, Pay attention to the sides of the breath that are pauses. And think about what's going on physiologically in your body as you're pausing. Think about bringing as much stillness, not just to the breath, but to the being as possible in each of those pauses. Give ourselves just 60 more seconds here, one more minute just to feel settled and experience the deep stillness of our pauses here. When it feels appropriate for you, if the legs are still extended, we're going to bend the knee. Feel that relaxation of the posterior chain, and then we'll let the knees fall to one side or the other. And just land here for a moment. Let your body reacclimate. As you're moving, much harder to keep that box breath going, but work yourself back into that cycle of inhale for a duration, pause for an equivalent, exhale for a duration, pause for an equivalent. And then we'll press ourselves up and make our way back to our mat if we've left it. Here we are going to grab a blanket/towel. A blanket or towel is going to run across the mat and is going to be just below the scapula. So depending on the thickness of the material you're working with, you may want this folded. This is a very thick blanket, so I'll fold here. But if you're working with a towel or a thinner blanket, a roll might be more appropriate. That's going to come behind us. And just kind of estimate where the top edge of your blanket will hit the bottom edge of your scapula. And then we're going to find staff again. Before we head onto our spine, we're going to add that dynamic forward fold with our respiration. Now we have two more sides of breath. So as you exhale, you take your forward fold. Your pause, you stay in your forward fold. As you inhale, you come back into staff, and the pause happens in staff before you restart the cycle into an exhale. is a much slower, more focused version of this dynamic movement. When you get into your stillness positions, think not just about the shape, but about bringing that same stillness that you had when we had the legs up the wall into this new orientation. And let's just give ourselves one more full cycle. No rush to be complete, but whenever you are, we're going to lower ourselves onto our mat, onto our prop. We want the scapula to be grounded, the top edge of the prop to be at that thoracic shelf-ish area, and the arms to be in a position where we can be as easeful as is possible for the shape for our body here, so that we can find our way back to our respiration. Equal parts inhale, pause, exhale, pause. So these two apprentices were not expecting payment, but they were expecting to learn. And so when they found themselves working for this sculptor without the benefit of learning, they began to grow frustrated. And they asked the sculptor on multiple occasions, can you teach us this technique? Can you show us the way you created this particular cut? And the sculptor's response was always very similar. It was something along the lines of, if I taught you that, the value of my work would be depreciated. If the value of my work is depreciated, my income is reduced. If my income is reduced, my grand project is delayed. And he would explain to his two apprentices and anyone who ever complained about the prices that he was saving money. And he was saving money because he wanted to create this magnificent piece out of jade. And every dollar earned was a dollar closer to being able to complete that goal. So when people would ask him to lower his price, he would say no, and he would tell them why. And when his apprentices wanted to learn techniques, he would say no, and he would tell them why. And it was always so that he could earn more, so that he could finish this grand project he had been dreaming about finishing. Check back in with the four corners of your breath, the four sides of your breath. and feel your way into the physiology of those pauses. Really experiencing the physiology of those pauses. We'll give ourselves roughly 60 more seconds here. Feeling this mid back lift, feeling our pause, our expansion, our contraction of respiration. When it feels appropriate for you, trying to maintain your 4 parts of breath. Let's bend the knees, lift our belt line, and slide our prop out from underneath us. Release the tailbone back down to the mat. Feel this kind of unfurling of the spinal column. Oh, into neutral. And let's have both of our props here. And you can bring these to just block like approximations, whatever works best for you. And we're going to let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide for a little supine butterfly with support. And ideally with quite a bit of space in the body, right? We've put space into the posterior chain. We're giving slack to that. We've put space into the structural spinal column itself with our last shape there, that mid back bend. And now we're just in a neutral spine, externally rotated to hips. We've offered space there. Really feel into the stillness The two sides of pause, the two sides of stillness in your breath cycle. And just try to experience those as deeply, as intently as you can. So, after some time, both of the apprentices that had come to this sculptor decide to leave. And each of them kind of come up in very close proximity to one another and just let the sculptor know that this isn't what they had expected and that they haven't learned what they had hoped. And the sculptor kind of responds, I understand. I wish you the best, but I have to do what's right for my own personal income. And sharing my secrets is not right for that. Eventually, the sculptor earned enough to buy this huge block of jade. And he closed the gates of his courtyard and he goes to work on this idea that's really been evolving in his head for decades. As his work progresses, he starts seeing more and more potential in this creation. And he starts realizing that this creation that he's going to put forth into the world is going to exceed the expectations of his dream. Just remember you're paying particularly close attention to the pauses in your respiration cycle and that four-sided respiration cycle. It's not the pause itself where the focus should be. The focus should be on what's going on within you as you're pausing. Give ourselves about 120 more seconds here. Slow cycles of respiration with these very distinct blocks of stillness. as the sculptor gets closer and closer to the completion of this incredible project, he becomes more and more excited about how this project is going to be received by the world. He's comparing it to other past projects he's done, that past projects that were revealed with great fanfare. And they don't hold a candle to what he's working on now. When it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling. You can remove those props, but you may want to keep them handy in case you want some propping for Shavasana. We'll pull the thighs in towards the torso to give ourselves a nice solid squeeze, little anterior hip capsule compression here. And then eventually, when it feels appropriate, bring your feet back down to the mat. And we're going to do a little bit of dynamic knee rotations with our box breath. So the next time that you exhale, you let the knees fall to the left. For the duration of your exhale breath, you pause and we stay in the twist for the duration. And then we inhale back to neutral, where we pause and we stay here for the duration of the pause. And then when the next exhale cycle comes, you let the knees fall to the second side, the right side. Duration of the exhale, we fall into the movement, pause for the duration. And then eventually you bring your knees back to neutral and you give yourself that pause before you start on side one again. Let's just work through this a couple of times. Our own speed, our own tempo, guided by our respiration. When it feels like you're balanced, when you feel like you're ready to be complete, let's come back to a point of stillness. And in this point of stillness, let's just ask ourselves if there's any last tweaks, adjustments, shifts that we could bring into the practice before Shavasana. There is, let's offer them now. If we're ready to find stillness, find a shape where you can appreciate some stillness. Determine whether you want to maintain the box cycle or you want to go back to a more natural cycle of respiration. And then we just drift our way into that ease. Eventually, this sculpture is completed. And this sculptor is very excited to open up his courtyard to the world. And as he prepares his courtyard, for the next morning's opening, He is expecting quite the crowd. The next morning, when the sculptor threw open the doors to what he expected would be an adoring crowd, he was greeted with a eerie silence. And yet, off in the distance, he heard cheers. Followed that sound down to the center of town, to this area of poverty in the center of town, where a huge celebration was going on. And in the center of the celebration, he saw his two former apprentices. These two women who he had given no tips or attention to were being celebrated, not for becoming great sculptors, but because they had given their time and energy building a stone aqueduct that carried water from a local creek, and a stone bridge that allowed people to traverse this very dangerous ravine. And the celebrations here were everything he expected when he opened the doors in the morning. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes as he walked back to his house, to his courtyard. Into our wrists and our ankles, he saw this immaculate thing he had created. And it stood in cold silence. Elbows, knees, shoulders, hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of our body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition our way into a seat. And in this seated space, spine gets tall once again, breast gets fluid, eyes close, and we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that what you get over the course of your life is how you make a living, but what you give is how you make a life, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste.